Go. We are live. Theology Thursday 25. So we're a quarter to the century mark. I don't take much time to celebrate, but I want to celebrate this because we've been pretty consistent. People have been coming out. People are actually starting to join us online. So shout out to everybody joining us online. Um, we want you to, if you're on the website, what we want you to do is participate in the discussion. What you'll see below the video is a discussion box. You could sign in with your social media accounts. You can sign in anonymously, but participate in the discussion because we're going to be talking about how to recognize a leader. Um, One of the reasons I decided to come up with this particular topic is because I was watching a lot of stuff with Donald Trump and these 100 pastors that are quote unquote technically supporting Trump. The backwards and forth with Jamal Bryant kind of lashing out. So I just wanted to figure out what exactly do we need to be looking for as it relates to following leaders, whether it's presidential leaders, whether it's church leaders, just leaders in general. What do we need to be looking for? Because I don't think we actually, at least I know in the past, I haven't necessarily analyzed it. Typically, what I've done is you kind of follow because everybody else is following. So you'll see a large group of people and you'll see people following that you think it's okay. And then if you're not careful, you might end up in like a cult. So I went to.
Oh, okay. Church stuff. I was just thinking, what?
Well, no.
Because I thought you meant for president. I'm thinking, following the president.
No, not presidents. But I mean,
Gotcha.
you have to be careful and aware of some characteristics. Now, I know we could generalize some stuff, and we'll get into that discussion too. But based on scripture and based on the characteristics of Jesus, I listed out a few details as it relates to what a good leader looks like. All right, so as usual, I'll start off with scripture. And two references I have is Mark chapter 1, verses 17. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." Other versions say, "I will make you fishermen of men." Luke 4:18 and 19 says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because He has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." So the reason, although we're going to be talking about different characteristics of Jesus, the reason I picked these two particular verses is because first with Mark, and Jesus is he's meeting Peter for the first time, and he's actually telling him, "You follow me, I'm gonna make you a leader." And they don't even know who this guy is. It's kind of weird that they're like, "Okay, we'll follow you." And then in Luke 4, Jesus actually lays out his mission statement, which is he's gonna bring good news to the poor. He's gonna proclaim release to the captives, recovery of the sight to the blind, and let the oppressed go free, which is actually a pretty radical mission statement for somebody's life in general. But he knows it, he lays it down, and he kind of sticks to it. So I wanted to just put those two verses out there as it relates to Jesus' ministry and how, initially how he got people to follow. So the question I have, and it's just us here tonight, how do you recognize a good leader? Without looking at my notes.
Oh, I was.
How do you recognize a good leader? And actually, if you're online now, like I said, what we want you to do is comment. We'll monitor the comment section. How do you guys recognize a good leader?
How do you recognize a good leader?
Yep. Or just share any leadership experience that you have as it relates to following people.
Well, the thing that you said about Jesus talking about his mission in Luke, I think that's important. To follow a good leader, to me, is that you're following somebody who has a specific vision and mission that they have expressed and that they're working toward. And so if they have that, and can be clear about what that is, excuse me, and can communicate that clearly with other people, excuse me, the people that they want to follow them. That to me is a start of a good leader, that you have something, because you can follow somebody. Like I've actually said this to a person before who was a leader, and they were like telling me, in order to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower. And I asked them the question, well, what am I following? Because I didn't know. Like,
Sorry, I remember that.
Because based on their leadership, I didn't know what I was following exactly because it wasn't clear. There wasn't consistent communication. I think that's another one.
Yeah.
There wasn't consistent direction, support, mentoring.
Yeah.
So those are things that I think off the top of my head that can make a good leader.
Yeah. So one of the things I find troubling in particular, this is why I was going to be extremely passionate about this particular study, and I may break it up into different segments, is when I was at seminary, I always went around to ask people their experience with leadership. And I like a lot of people that I got into contact with, I would ask them, how do you learn how to be a leader? How have you been learning? And they were like, unfortunately, my experience in serving other people has been so bad. What I just do is I've taken that experience to just do the opposite. Right. And I kind of find that troubling, whether it's a lack of leadership training or people not actually having maybe discernment, or people just kind of being stuck in situations where they have no choice but to follow a poor leader, which is actually kind of scary.
I mean, I think that's how a lot of people have to learn, and I've had to learn that too. And it sucks because you don't always want to learn what not to do. Yeah. You want to learn what to do. You want to have an example that you're going to follow and model, as opposed to, well, I just went through this experience and I ain't never doing that and that and that and that. So when I be a leader, I'm not going to do those things. Yeah. Like a negative, I call it like a negative way of learning. That's a way of learning, but that's not my preference. My preference is to have positive examples so that there's something that I can mimic and model, and then, develop my own.
Hey, what's going on? So grocery shop, that's good. Just to catch you up, we're talking about how to recognize a good leader. So we just started, and we were trying to figure out how do you recognize a good leader, what you've been told about leadership in general,
and
what you've experienced. Yeah. And just pretty much that. You made a face.
Okay. I'm gonna keep it positive.
Yeah. Oh, if you have bad experience, that's fine too.
Well, as an introvert who works for someone who's an extrovert, our definitions of leadership and versions of leadership are very different. Mm-hmm. So I've learned a lot about my preferred style and her preferred style. I think to me, a leader is someone who steps up to the plate voluntarily and takes on the mission or sets the vision for whatever is going on. Mm-hmm. And they may do that out loud, with a fanfare out in the front, or they may do it behind the scenes and not necessarily have to tell people everything that they're doing. But to me, the essence of a leader is that they have a passion for bringing out the best in other people, and for making whatever vision or mission or cause that they feel inspired about, making that a reality.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So
kept that nice and positive.
Yep. Good job right there. Communication. So what I wanted to do, I'm going to bring up some of the typical things we tend to look for in leaders, which is good, but this is still not stuff I've actually found in scripture as it relates to Jews. So, and I'll actually post this on the site as a resource as well. So one PDF that I got, which talks about how to recognize leadership character in an individual. It talks about integrity, empathy, lack of blame, humility, emotional mastery, accountability, self-confidence, courage, and focus on the whole. So I think a lot of those are things we could typically pick out in people and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I want to focus on some of these characteristics of Christ that are kind of not necessarily unique to Christ, but things we might not necessarily look at.
But those are good.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not throwing those away.
No, I know you're not throwing them away. But I guess what I want to say about it, those are good because as you were reading them, I'm sitting there thinking, I have experienced so many leaders who don't have a lot of those. No, I could name multiple. Actually, integrity, like that is a big one that I have experienced with leaders so many that I've experienced, they don't have. It's a huge lack of integrity, the lack of empathy, The what else? I mean, I know you didn't want to go that route, but it was just like, wow.
One that stands out on this list is emotional mastery. Like, that one.
Oh my God.
And actually, that's one I could have put in Jesus, but I had to cut the list. I was actually gonna include this, but I'm like, nah, the list is just getting way too big.
Yeah, because I feel like, I've just experienced this in the last 5 or so years of seeing a lack of emotional mastery, where people who are in leadership positions get in their feelings. They focus on who they like versus how this works together as a whole and how we can move this thing forward. Like, it's amazing just how bad some of these leaders are.
So let me read since we got on the emotional mastery, let me read the bullet points for that. It says, doesn't berate others when annoyed or disappointed, maintains composure during times of stress, pressure, or disagreement, is able to manage anxiety in difficult situations, can listen to tough feedback and bad news without overreacting, and also can express disagreement calmly. So, and a lot of that, the thing is, with that particular one, you may have to witness somebody actually get into a conflict first before you actually know. So sometimes this stuff is actually going to take time to figure out.
Right.
So let's talk about my Christ list. All right. So one of the things that stands out to me, especially with a lot of pastors that I watch, and even with some of the pastors I watch online, especially the ones that tend to be extremely big, is they don't speak to social issues. And for the life of me, I can't understand why. I'm not going to call anybody out, but for the life of me, I can't understand why certain pastors that have huge influence online, in person, television. I don't understand why some of them don't speak to the social issues that are going on when Christ spoke to social issues. So you take the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is talking about the first being last. So Jesus is aware of the social and political structure of his context, and he speaks to it, and he speaks to the individuals who are being taken advantage of in the situation. But you get these not necessarily televangelists, but you get some televangelists, some pastors that won't mention this Sunday coming up. They won't mention the thing that happened in California. They won't mention mass shootings. They won't mention us being at war. They won't mention this stuff. But Jesus is actually mentioned that stuff, and was kind of thrown in the middle of everything going on in
and look what
first
happened.
century. Well, yeah, I guess it's scary. But from my perspective,
he died.
Yeah. but I guess from my perspective, how can you, especially if you're in the leader or position of pastor, how can you be in a position of that and not speak to the social?
Because look what happened. I'm being serious and facetious. Jesus died for that. So, and because of that, and for whatever, so many other reasons. So if you have people on these large platforms, unfortunately, those large platforms give you power, give you a lot of luxury.
Yeah.
And then, not saying that they don't do great work, because they do. Yeah. They do great work as well, but there's a huge cost. When you go down the road that you're talking about. Yeah. A huge cost. They cost Jesus his life. And for these people, they'll lose what? Who was that pastor's name?
They might not lose much.
Was it Pearson? Or I can't remember the pastor's name, where he used to be considered an evangelical pastor. And he started preaching against hell because he realized that to think that my grandmother would be in hell, he couldn't fathom that. Yeah. So when he started basically talking about maybe a universal kind of salvation.
Oh yeah.
Right. They did away with it. No, you got to go. They put him out in a sense, and I think he's built his way back up. But shut him down. Yeah. Because when you start doing something different, there's a huge risk. Yeah, but the thing is, you need to start, Jesus started out that way. So you don't need to establish this fancy, shiny ministry and then to be like, oh, I'm going to speak to social issues now that I'm on and popping. No, you speak to that from jump. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying what happened. And because if for many of us, if you see something happen, you will become fearful. You'll become doubtful. And sometimes you might not do the very thing that you might be called to do.
Okay.
Because of that. That's what I'm saying. Like, I definitely believe you should speak to social issues, but if you're gonna like be martyred for it, if you're gonna, you know, lose everything for it, some people will really be like, I don't know about all that. Maybe there's something else I can do, like talk about prosperity.
Yeah.
There's a false dichotomy in our society, at least in U.S. society. I can't speak for the rest of the world because I haven't come from the rest of the world. But in U.S. society, we tend to like to polarize things into either dichotomies or trichotomies, where it's either black, white, or black, white, yellow. And in U.S. society, the trichotomy is religion, science, and politics. Those are the three things, and they never mix. Everybody stays in their own little camp, and very few people are allowed to cross those lines to speak on the two that they are not a part of their camp. And I think it's such an ingrained part of the culture here in the U.S. that people don't even think about it, and when they do, other people around them sort of rain down insults or bad things happen to people who cross those lines. And you can see it with Martin Luther King.
Yep.
The gentleman that we just talked about that started preaching universalism. And there are some religious groups that do cross the lines, like Unitarian Universalism. They have a strong social justice focus as part of their tradition. Quakers also as part of their tradition. But you don't see your pastors, Quaker pastors, up on TV at night.
Yeah.
With these big, huge mega churches either.
Yeah.
So,
wait, hold on. I have a large list, so let me go through the list, and then we can do this discussion. That was just number one. That was only number one. So I'm gonna go through the list, and then we can get into the discussion. All right. So number one, which we got passionate about because it's social justice. Social justice is important. So number one is social justice. Another characteristic that Jesus models as it relates to being a good leader is Jesus challenged the disciples to lead as well. So one thing that stands out to me is in Luke 10, Jesus sent 72 people out to cast out demons and in his name, and we don't even know if they were actually ready. They actually just went out. He sent them out a certain way. Don't carry any purse or bags or anything like that. And they came back like, oh man, we were able to cast out demons in your name. It seems like sometimes from the context, I get that they were kind of surprised. Maybe I'm just reading that in there. But they came back hyped like, oh man, we were able to do that. So Jesus actually challenged others to lead as well, even if they weren't necessarily ready. Because if you look at it, the rest of the disciples, the 12, traveled with Jesus throughout the rest of his life, which is, they say, was like roughly maybe 3 years. So there's that. Jesus loved those who weren't worthy people. We know how Jesus loved people. Jesus tells us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So good leaders will love other people outside of just their tight circle. Jesus guarded his energy. So oftentimes we as leaders work. But if you notice, Jesus always took time to be separate and pray and be by himself. Jesus. Maybe I haven't read that one in a while.
Oh, I listened to that. Never mind.
Jesus only requested noble things from his followers. So Jesus didn't tell anybody to kill anybody. He didn't tell anybody to crucify anybody. Now, I know for people who may be in the military, this may be a little bit sketchy because they kind of have to follow orders. That may actually be a topic on its own. So I just wanted to throw that in there, right? So there's that. Jesus saw life and death situations despite the unbelief of others. So if you look at John 11, Jesus raises Lazarus, and Martha and Mary are like, oh, basically, if you were here, this wouldn't have happened. And Jesus said, you know what, I'm going to raise him anyway. So despite whatever situation good leaders are going through, they see life in these situations where other people aren't able to see that life. So there's that. Of course, he served others. Matthew 20:28 says, just as the Son of Man came out to be served. Well, just as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give life as a ransom for many. So Jesus is serving others. We know that. Here's one that stood out to me. Remember, you said leaders have to learn to follow. It's interesting that you say that because Jesus was a follower, right? So I thought about this that was pretty unique, and I hadn't considered Jesus a follower until I realized there's a certain point in Scripture Jesus didn't want to go on to be crucified. So he asked, I think in Luke, well, one of the places is Luke 22:42. It says, "Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me." But then he says, "Not my will, but your will be done." So you see Jesus struggled with being crucified up until a certain point, but he still followed God's leading in terms of, going to the cross. Jesus was always around the people he served, and Jesus was open to criticism. So there's a unique situation in Matthew 15 where a woman is asking Jesus for help, and Jesus says something real, from my perspective, just seemed kind of reckless. I don't know if he was testing her or what, but he says it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. And she challenges him. She says, "Yes, Lord, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." And then Jesus turns around and blesses her because of her faith. So she could have just left and been like, but I think she kind of bucked back at Jesus like, well, even dogs take, the crumbs. And she got blessed because of her willingness to stand up. And Jesus didn't buck back at her. He was like, "Oh, yeah, you're right. Be blessed." And finally, Jesus trained his replacements. So throughout the context of his life, even though it seems like the disciples aren't ready at times, Jesus stayed with them. And Luke 6:40 lets us know a disciple is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully qualified will be like the teacher. So he was training disciples to be like him. And you see Peter actually is able to do some of the things Jesus did in Acts. So I wanted to zip through that because I know we could get into any one of these to discuss. And so any thoughts, any ideas about any of them? And I kind of just sped through them, but I just wanted to be sure I hit every single one.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought from the one before.
The social justice one was kind of heavy.
I know it was social justice, but I lost my train of thought on that one.
So which one of these do you think is key that you haven't seen that should be like top priority?
Read them again.
So he spoke to social issues. A good leader will challenge you to lead. Good leader will love people who don't seem to be worthy. Leaders guard their energy. Leaders will request noble things from you. Jesus saw, or leaders will see life and death situations. Leaders serve others. Leaders are also good followers. Leaders are visible around the people they serve. Leaders are open to criticism, and leaders will train their replacements. And that was it.
Mm-hmm. So what was your question?
Which one do you see that is key that you haven't seen before? Like, which one of these do you think is like, this should happen and it hasn't been happening in my experience?
More than one.
Anyone?
I like the one about saying life and death situation, because I know that many leaders, especially when they are working toward a vision, you're gonna have a lot of people around you who doubt.
Yeah.
And so to still see life and work through that, I think is important. But then there was another one at the what was it? Train replacement.
That's a big one in church. I think it kind of happens, but not necessarily.
It's interesting. That was the one that stuck out to me too. The one where leaders challenge other people to lead and training their replacements. A lot of churches, well, the ones that I've been to, some of them have seemed to be very top down over leadership. Yeah. And so the replacement is either handpicked, or either with someone's society or something like that. So you don't really I haven't seen people being trained to go out and lead at the same level as the top leader.
Yeah.
You can be a Bible study, leader, or campus ministry leader, or something like that, but to be all the way up at the top of the hierarchy, that's usually reserved for just one couple. And then training replacements. Yeah.
So you had experience training replacements?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why I chose that one too. Yeah.
People do the opposite, where they hoard the knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't share it down the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And when they leave, there's this massive brain drain, and the organization's kind of scrambling
Yep.
to fill in the gap and understand what it was that they created. And they don't have a picture of exactly all the steps involved that person did.
Yeah.
Did you say that in church or business?
That's both. Yeah, I've seen that in both.
Oh, I've seen that in both. Yeah.
The interesting thing about that. So, I've been in organizations where you're right, people will hold on to the information because they kind of create this security blanket around them.
Mm-hmm.
But then that's not, you're right, that's not really being a leader. That's some sort of fear-based thing. Because I understand the idea that people don't want to work themselves out of a position. But when you kind of hoard knowledge, you put yourself in a weird situation to where, well, like let's say, for instance, you're supporting an organization. If something happens to you, then everything dies with you, and then the organization is kind of left scrambling to figure stuff out. So for those of us who consider ourselves leaders or working on leadership, I don't think we need to be fearful that we're actually going to work ourselves out of a job per se.
Right.
And I actually might die. So I'm starting now, and even though I'm working on being a leader, it's still going to be unraveling, trying to produce more leaders to the point where somebody else will take over and run with it.
Right. Yeah, because leadership.
Not next year though, but maybe like 15
anyway.
or something.
Leadership isn't always at the top either. Like we all can be leaders at whatever part of the organization that we're in. So even at like middle levels and everything, there's still leaders there. And I think that's where I've seen it. Actually, I've seen it everywhere, but a lot of times it's in the middle where the people, you need them. Like the organization absolutely needs these positions. Mm-hmm. And it's that one person where, Brooke does this. Yeah. Brooke doesn't show anybody how to do this stuff. Because Brooke is the one, so when Brooke's on vacation, no one knows. Like everything stops. It stops. Wait till she gets back. And the organization supports that behavior. Yeah. Which is like crazy. Because I'm like, if Brooke, right, like you said, if Brooke dies, y'all are short. You have to come up, scramble with a new way of doing it. And then you make the whole thing suffer because of that. But then I've seen the people themselves in those positions, like they really don't want people to know what they're doing. Oh, I want to join you, Brooke. Oh, well, I'll just show you this little bit. Like, for what? And
I've heard people saying he's the one, 2 rights and 3 wrongs.
What? Oh, that's insane.
Seriously, like they'll say never, teach them 2 of the things you do, but show them how to do 3 things wrong. And so all of it. And there's people there who conduct themselves that way at work. And again, I hate to keep bringing culture into it, but that whole idea of becoming highly specialized in one aspect of your job is actually a facet of, if you go back and look at labor history, that's how our country became so great and was able to mass produce things at the scale that we do. Mm-hmm. Because when you have, in your company, the way the bureaucracy works and the way the assembly lines work is you have each person pigeonholed in their one job. They become expert at it, and they do it so well that everybody else is doing their job so well that things are able to come off the line faster. Right. Because you have people who are not cross-trained in everything. Yeah. Right. They're highly special. And you can see it in academia, too, with the pursuit of the PhD, where you become highly specialized in a very narrow field of knowledge. So I think, in the church, Jesus' example is the opposite of all that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So let me ask this question because I think we kind of hit heavy on all of the good characteristics. What are the dangers of following poor leadership or not challenging leadership to be better?
Burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Um, mm.
I think,
Yeah.
and getting bored.
Yeah.
Or false hope in something that's not even real.
Yeah.
And then when the whole thing crashes, people are left sort of in the lurch, like with their faith. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, what did I participate in?
Right.
Or what do I do from here?
Right. Oh yeah, or even like when it comes to the way businesses operate, that impacts your money. Like that impacts how you're able to provide for your family. Like if some of those companies have gone under, like Enron. When they did all that stuff, like you ruined people's lives at that moment in time, and they had to rebuild. And so yeah, I think it can be a bunch of different things that can occur just on the job as well as in your personal life.
Well, I mean, and at the end of the day, God isn't glorified through any of that.
Right.
Good point.
Right.
So I mean, and I think that's kind of the goal for everything that we do as believers is to give glory to God.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't, it seems like that wouldn't happen in a scenario where the leadership wasn't like what you described with the Jesus list.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it gets tricky. 'Cause as I think about it now that we're having this discussion, man, I don't think I've ever tried to discern whether or not I should be following somebody, which is scary because it could have turned out way worse.
Yeah.
Like if you think about the situations we were in, no, there were no. I thought I had signs, but it might have been signs for different reasons. But never, and there was never a direct ask like, God, should I be following this individual?
Yeah, I like that.
I did that.
You did that? Did you get your sign?
Yes.
Okay. Was the sign stay or go? Okay. Man,
That is it, but that's a really important thing to do.
I want to. Okay, so if people are online, let's see. Let's before we sign out, this is what I want you to do. I want you to answer the question: have you ever prayed whether or not you should be following your leaders? Comment below. We're there. I know there's like a 60-second delay, but we'll still catch it. But yeah, just thinking about that, man,
Yeah.
I've never.
That's any leader. That's at a job. That's at church.
Yeah.
Your community organization.
It could be
whatever.
volunteers. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, for me, it's like, it's not conscious for me that it's like a direct. Well, in one scenario, it was, should I really be a part of this per se? It's following leadership and following their guidance. But for me, it's like, this is a scenario in my life.
Yep.
If I'm supposed to follow someone in a church scenario, it's very clear to me what the results are supposed to be in my life. Jesus has them all written down. New creation, happy, joyful, prosperous, abundant, all this wonderful stuff.
I didn't take the time to make sure.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, person in charge, if I follow you, the Bible says all this stuff is supposed to appear in my life due to your awesome leadership, my faith, grace, mercy, all this other stuff that's at work. It's not just my good deeds, So if I'm following this person and I'm trying to, live a Christ-like life, and I don't see all these things showing up in my life, to me, that's the red flag. That's the litmus test. Something's wrong. Either I'm doing something wrong, the leadership is off, the vision is not what we should be doing. I need to be more faith. Something in all that is wrong. And so for me, that's kind of how I start to realize that something's amiss.
What's the time period on that?
List the 3 or 4 things again.
There's so many things in the Bible. Fruit of the Spirit. You can go to Galatians for all that. I'm a new creation. I'm joyful. I'm abundant. I have more faith. I can work miracles. Like all these different things are supposed to be happening in my life. And abundance isn't necessarily financial, although that's nice. And I really like it. Yeah. But there's all this stuff that's supposed to be happening.
all these blessings and stuff that are supposed to be happening. And if they're missing, sometimes, not always, because it could be a Job situation.
Yeah.
It may not necessarily be that I'm doing something wrong. However, I was trained in the group that I was a part of that I should check my heart first and also ask for discernment.
Right.
And if God is saying, sorry, just a bad season, you're in the wilderness, I'll help you, then I don't feel guilty. But God will also say, that wasn't right.
Yeah.
So then it's like, oh man, I need to repent. I need help. Something in my character needs to be worked on. So, and then other times, the one situation I'm thinking of, it was that this place that I was at, the religious community that I was part of, just wasn't a good fit for me, and it was time for me to leave. So, it's your own individual discernment, to figure out exactly what's going on, and God will reveal it. But that, for me, that's sort of how I put it through that test of, should I be following this leadership?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like, at what point do you start to question that?
Yeah.
For me, it was misery. I was miserable.
Misery. Okay.
You don't want to get to misery.
Yeah.
Right. You don't. Because I'm like, yeah. Because that's actually really good. 7 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm not saying I got all this brilliance and insight like 3 weeks in.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, faithful and zealous for a number of years before I was like, wait a minute, something ain't stirring the Kool-Aid with all this. It wasn't my brilliance. It's,
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that is you still can't, for people who are mediocre leaders or even maybe poor leaders at times, God still could use them to teach you things, which is pretty interesting how it works.
It all works
Yeah,
good.
exactly.
Right.
So I think about my
Which is why you get those, this is what not to do.
exactly. Oh, so this is how you don't want me to be. I got it.
Yeah.
If I do the opposite, okay, I got it. Right? Surely that's just as long as I knew. Like sometimes you don't know you're supposed to do the opposite until things get topsy turvy. Then you're like, oh, okay, let me just go ahead and do the opposite.
Right.
I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
You were talking about like the leadership and how you
Something you experienced.
Yes.
Example.
But you I think you raised some good points. The only thing I would add to that is when you're doing self-reflection or self-examination, what you also have to be aware of is leaders who always point the finger at the individual and not include themselves, because what they do is create a mindset of you and you're wrong and you have to do all this stuff. And we were taught that, like, don't point at the congregation. You include yourself. So like what I try to do or be aware of is, like, if I'm gonna preach a message or give a message, if I'm using stories and stuff like that, I don't say you guys. I try to make sure I'm aware of saying us. Because when you point like this, you automatically put yourself on a pedestal, and Jesus was never really on that pedestal in the context of his own time. He was with the people and everything like that.
Yep.
So that's one thing you have to be aware of, because if you ever get to this place where you're like, well, you're questioning whether or not you should follow somebody, and then you kind of just reflect on yourself so much, you have to realize, well, for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, has this individual always been pointing the finger at the congregation, or has the individual included themselves with the congregation and also critiqued themselves as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's an easy way to deflect
Responsibility for poor leadership is to say, well, the people underneath me stink. So
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. I think that is
You
how
guys
they do
ain't
it.
you guys ain't pulling your weight.
You're not doing
You
X,
ain't-
Y, and Z. I've been delegating to you, but you ain't doing it right.
Membership is down because of you guys, and whatever.
Yeah.
Anything else? I think
You
we had
tell
a
us,
lot
leader.
there. I just feel like I kind of rushed through. So I just wanted to be sure like everything was clear, because I know I kind of machine gunned through all those topics. So at least I felt I went pretty
No, it
fast.
was fine. It was
Anybody
fine.
online got any comments? We need you guys to be interactive. No?
Nope. But
All
we'll
right.
see you there. But and you're gonna post the characteristics.
Yeah,
of the
so what
leader.
I'll do,
I like that list.
what I'll do along with the notes that I take, I'm gonna post the links. It's a PDF that also gives you characteristics of a good leader. Ultimately, the goal with this discussion was to have a set list of things to go to to where you can have this list and then you can look at your leader and kind of line it up and be like, all right, well, this is, oh, he's not doing X, Y, and Z. Maybe I should kind of reconsider whether or not I'm following this person or not.
Or reconsider the ways in which I'm following this person.
Actually, you can hold me accountable too. Hold that list up to me, because I'm going to be studying it to be sure that I'm on point and on key. And that's all I got. So what do we have coming up? Man, Christmas is coming up.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving. I know we were off last week, so happy Thanksgiving to everybody that celebrated, which I assume is everybody watching. And we will be off Christmas. Christmas is on a Thursday, right? Same day as Thanksgiving.
Christmas Eve.
So we'll be off Christmas Eve. And that's it. I don't really have nothing.
Thanks for watching.
Usually,
not yet.
we hadn't made that, so we'll be doing some more outreach this year. This month. Typically, we do a homeless community. I know this month we want to sponsor a family or work with an organization as it relates to Christmas and, trying to uplift somebody's spirit. So we're going to pull back and do a little bit different. In January, you'll start to see a lot of new things with what we're going to do as it relates to moving towards our first worship experience. So be on the lookout for that stuff. Please share everything. If like the message, like us on Facebook, all that stuff like that, social media wise. When you boost us through social media, we get more eyes and stuff like that, and we're able to help more people. So that is it. I'm at Mr. Terrell Harris on everything. That's at Land of Brook on everything. And that is it. Peace and blessings. Have a good one.
That is it. Number 10.
Number 10, right? Yeah,
that is it.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys later.